And I will share my screen. Okay. All right, so tonight we'll be talking about special circumstances and reasons to appeal your financial aid decision with the financial aid office. So I have a lot of information to cover. So this is the agenda. So we'll talk about professional judgment, which is basically a special circumstance and the type of appeals that come with a professional judgment, and then a documentation that has to be provided, and an understanding that each year you submit, have a circumstance, you do have to resubmit your appeal. And then the awarding that happens as a result to a readjustment to your FAFSA application, and then also some waivers that apply to the College Opportunity Fund, or COF. So first, what is professional judgment, or PJ, which is commonly known in the financial aid office? So it's basically a modification of the information that you provided on the FAFSA with proper documentation that will be requested from you by the financial aid office. And the goal is to assist students and families with obtaining additional aid to make you more aid eligible. So financial aid administrators have full discretion to modify information on the FAFSA application. And the information that they modify is generally final. It cannot even be appealed with the U.S. Department of Education. So it lies strictly with the financial aid office. So general rule of thumb is that only provide documentation that's been requested from you. Okay? If the financial aid office is not asking for it, do not submit it, because if you provide something that appears different than what you have on the FAFSA application, it creates a discrepancy or conflicting information, and then that will require them to ask for even more information before they can finalize the results of your FAFSA application to generate an award for you. So what can be changed as a result of a professional judgment or a PJ? A student's expected family contribution, which is the EFC. You'll find that on the student aid report, and that's what the financial aid office uses to determine how needy a family is and how much aid can be awarded to a student. The cost of attendance, or the budget, which is the amount that the college generate based on the estimate of what a student's tuition and fees, books allowance, room and board, personal allowance could add up to. So for example, a student's cost of attendance for a fall and spring year could be $25,000. But if it turns out that there's a need to make an adjustment to increase that cost of attendance to give the student additional funding, then they will go in and update that cost of attendance with the appropriate documentation. Other things that will change is a student and parents' financial and household data that's recorded on the FAFSA. It could be information that's supported with taxes or investment documents. And then also a student's dependency status can be reviewed through a professional judgment or an appeal process. This consists of a dependency override, whether the student is unaccompanied youth or at risk of being homeless, and there's other statuses that we will review. So how the professional judgment helps. If it reduces the expected family contribution, or the EFC, it helps the student to become more need-based eligible. So it could be that prior to a professional judgment, the student wasn't Pell eligible, and now with the adjustments based on that PJ, now the student is eligible for the Pell Grant, some additional institutional funds and scholarships, as well as a subsidized loan versus an unsubsidized loan. So there's definitely benefits to doing a professional judgment. It can also increase the cost of attendance or budget, as I mentioned, and this usually only provides an increase to student loans or a parent loan. If a student is already at the top of their budget, they've received all the funding they could possibly have. With an increase in the budget, then it may allow for additional borrowing through the Parent Plus loan, or if the student has to get a private or alternative student loan. It usually does not help to secure additional grant funding. So with professional judgment, verification must be completed before a financial aid administrator can provide a professional judgment adjustment to your data on the FAFSA. Basically, what that means is that all the information that is requested when you initially complete the FAFSA has to be completed on that original FAFSA application. You have to get your award notice, and then if your aid is not sufficient, then you would then be eligible to submit a income appeal or medical appeal, various different appeals that are available. Now, if the student is selected for verification by the federal processor, meaning that additional documentation is required before they can provide you with that original award notice, that has to be completed first before a professional judgment appeal can be performed by the financial aid office. So what happens with PJ changes? So if you, say for example, you're submitting a income adjustment appeal because the information that you provided on the FAFSA was from 2019. So maybe you had a job where you were making 80,000, and now with COVID, there's been a lot of changes in jobs, you're losing their jobs, so maybe now your income is only 45. So they would ask for a personal statement, basically explaining what your circumstances are, how you've been impacted, and what you feel your income collection or what you receive as far as your income, what it will be throughout the end of the year. And usually that will be from a January through a December calendar year. So it just varies on the form. So they'll ask for that personal statement, explaining that, and then ask for you to provide whatever documents that can support that statement. So if it's a loss of income, you may have a letter from your employer saying you've been laid off. It could be unemployment documentation. If you've lost a job, it could be, a termination letter. So anything that can sort of support your circumstances. If it is approved, then the financial aid office will go into the FAFSA. Usually they will go in and do a simulation of the information that they would like to change to support the family, see if it will make a difference mainly to the EFC. And if it does, then they will go ahead and submit those changes. If not, then they won't submit the changes because it's a very tedious process. And if it's not going to give you more aid, then they're not going to go through with the professional judgment. If it does, then they will go in and update the FAFSA, resubmit it to the federal processor to determine what type of additional aid that you can receive. Now, one thing you have to be careful about with any type of appeal is that if you did not originally put the information on your FAFSA correctly the first time, and then a documentation that you have provided creates a conflict that will maybe decrease your aid, then you run into that as well. So you have to be very conscious about the information that you're providing on the FAFSA, and the information that you're providing is accurate. Once they submit it to the federal processor, then the financial aid office will get the results back. The financial aid office receives something called a ISAR, and it's basically just the electronic version of the student aid report. And the student will also get a copy of a new copy of the student aid report. So anytime there's a change to the FAFSA that generates a new student aid report, then it generates a new transaction. So once that is received by the financial aid office, then they will go in and review the information, make sure all the adjustments were properly made, determine what the new EFC is, and re-award the student to provide them with additional funding if that EFC was decreased. So this is an example of the front page of the student aid report. Up here where it says DE03, that tells me that there's 3 transactions. So if you've only submitted your FAFSA once and the financial aid office went in and did a professional judgment and it creates an additional transaction, it would say 02 here. But then if someone else goes in and make an additional adjustment, it'll be 03. So they're tracking every time there's been a change to the FAFSA and it's been resubmitted. So requirements for the PJ, so every PJ adjustment or update must be reasonable, justifiable, and appropriately documented. In case the financial aid office is audited by the U.S. Department of Education, they have to prove why they made those adjustments to their students' FAFSA. So that's why that information has been requested. It will be kept on file, usually about 5 to 7 years. I think those documents are held. But they have to have that information on file in case there's an audit for the auditor to review. Every PJ is considered a case-by-case situation, so it's not a one-size-all situation. So they look at each one situation individually. That's why it takes a while. It could take at least 2 months for them to get through a professional judgment appeal, because one could be submitting 20 pieces of paper or 50 pieces of paper, depending on what the circumstances are. So it's very tedious. They do have to look at every single document. So documentation must be from a third party, someone that can sort of assert to what your circumstances are and what you've been dealing with, related to whatever the student's circumstances are, or it could be to what the parent's circumstances are, if it's a parent that's submitting the information as relates to changes to the FAFSA. And again, any conflicting information or inconsistent information received from the student or the parent must be resolved before the professional judgment can be made and adjustments can be made to the student's award. So financial aid administrators can make adjustments to the FAFSA data without a signature from the student or the parent as relates to the FAFSA. Now, when a student goes in to make any adjustments or a parent make any adjustments to the student FAFSA, they have to resubmit and sign with the FSA ID username and password. So what that's saying is that the financial aid administrator has the authority to go in and make adjustments based on documentation that they've received to correct your file or the data that's on your FAFSA without a signature from you. Your signature comes from on that income adjustment appeal form or whatever type of form you are already signing, given the permission to update that information. So once an appeal is submitted, and if it's a situation that happens with a family or a student every single year, you have to reappeal that situation every single year. It doesn't carry from year to year. So you do have to reappeal every single year based on whatever your circumstances are. And all adjustments by an aid administrator are final, and they cannot be appealed by the U.S. Department of Education. You can try to appeal it with the financial aid office to have them look at it again, but chances are they've made a sound decision unless you provided some additional documentation that you didn't provide before. And sometimes that will happen. An appeal will get denied because the student or parent did not provide sufficient information for them to be able to make a sound decision. So types of appeals, and any appeal that you submit goes directly to the financial aid office, not to FAFSA or to the federal processor. All appeals take place on the financial aid level within the financial aid office. So again, if there's a case of job loss or reduction in income, if there's a death of a student or a parent, illness or medical expenses that are not covered by insurance, in the case of divorce or separation or any other kind of unusual circumstance, we want students to be able to continue with their education without feeling like they have to drop out of school. So you would, anytime there's a change in your circumstances, you got expenses that were not foreseen, contact the financial aid office, let them know what's going on so they can try to see if there's additional resources that could be allocated to you. So also an appeal situation could be a homeless or unaccompanied youth situation. So the definition of homeless has various different categories. So homeless means lacking fixed, regular, or adequate housing. You could be couch surfing, sleeping with a friend, Unaccompanied means that you're physically living away from your parent or your guardian. And youth means that you are 21 years of age or younger. You're still in high school at the time that you submit the FAFSA. So there's various different components relating to homelessness or unaccompanied youth. So there is a loophole sort of with the age as it relates to unaccompanied and homeless youth. So students in this situation that's between the ages of 21 and 23, for financial aid purposes, all students are considered dependent on their parents up until 24. For the homeless and unaccompanied youth, it goes to age 21. So we have that 21 to 23 loophole there. So students that fall into this category should consider completing something called a dependency override with the financial aid office to try to determine your dependency status where you're not having to provide parent information.
Lisa, we've got a question in the chat about financial aid reports and when they are being sent out.
Financial aid reports?
Correct, like the student aid notices? That's what I believe they're asking. Feel free to unmute yourself if you would like to clarify.
So I'm assuming that you're asking about award notices. So award notices will go out for CU Denver. I believe that they'll probably go out the end of this month for probably mid-March. I know they're in the process of getting all that changed over from this current year to the next year. So I would say by mid-March, award notices should be going out. All right. So also as it relates to unaccompanied youth and homeless, the Financial Aid Administration may require additional information to make a determination as it relates to unaccompanied student or homeless youth. So generally, if you provide documentation from any of these sources that I've listed below, the Financial Aid Office will not contest whether a student is in a homeless situation or not. They will use that documentation to support it. And if that is approved, then parent information will not be required on the FAFSA, just the student's information. They'll be able to submit that and get awarded financial aid. And here are some other resources of documentation that could be submitted to support that, as well as here. So there's a lot of information. So you just basically have to just document what your circumstances are and what that looks like so that we can properly update your file and resubmit your FAFSA application. So another big component of an appeal is satisfactory academic progress, or something that we call SAP in the Financial Aid Office. So in order to continue to be eligible to receive financial aid, a student has to be progressing each semester. And the school set what those standards are for satisfactory academic progress. And so a student has to maintain at least a 2.0 cumulative GPA at the end of each semester. For CU Denver, you have to complete at least 67% of your courses each semester. Some schools say 75%, but for CU it's 67%. And then you have to continue towards completing your degree or certificate program within 150% time frame. Basically, what that means is for a typical undergraduate degree, it takes about 120 credits to complete an undergraduate degree. The Department of Education is going to give you an additional 50%. So half of that 120 is 60. So for a total of 180 credits to complete your degree and still be eligible to receive financial aid. If you go beyond 180 credit hours, then that's when you will have to appeal to the Financial Aid Office to get additional funding to complete your degree. So the SAP standards, either student is in good standing. So if you're meeting all those three components, then you're in good standing. If you don't meet at least one of those components, then you will be put in a warning status. And if your appeal is approved, then you will be on probation for that semester. Okay. The only case where you may go into suspension of financial aid immediately is if you flunk all of your classes for that particular semester. Okay. And then suspension is then where you're not able to receive any financial aid at all. You can still take classes, but the financial aid office will not give you funding in order to pursue that. And with any appeal, you have to provide documentation, and the status of that appeal will either be approved, denied, or you may have an approval or denial with conditions. So it's important to mention that incomplete classes, withdrawals, anytime you repeat classes, you change your major or transfer credits from one school to another, this can impact your satisfactory academic progress. So be mindful of that. So some of the statuses, again, if you submit your appeal and it's approved, then you will be approved on probation. You will have 1 semester to get back on track. So you will be monitored. Okay? You could be approved on probation with conditions, meaning that they may say, well, we'll give you financial aid for the semester, but you have to pass 2 classes or 6 credit hours, or you can only take 6 credit hours. And if you pass those successfully, then we'll put you back in good standing. Or it could be denied with aid being suspended. And again, you can still take classes, but you will be on your own. It could be denied with conditions, and aid is suspended, meaning that, okay, we'll give you opportunity. If you take 6 credit hours and come back and you're successful, then we will allow you to reappeal to see if you could be considered for financial aid. Be mindful that multiple appeals, so if you're appealing every single semester, you're not meeting satisfactory academic progress, at some point, the financial aid office has to permanently suspend your financial aid at that particular school. Your SAP status does not follow you from school to school, but it is being tracked. So the colleges will be aware based on your enrollment history at the various schools. So if you're transferring between schools and schools without actually academically progressing or building any credits, then that's going to be looked at. It's something called an unusual enrollment history that the schools have to take into consideration. So I see a question in the chat here. Let me see if I can get to it. Okay, so nothing there. And then if there's any suspicion of fraud or misuse of federal funds, then you could be financially suspended as well. So usually with an unusual enrollment history, is a student will enroll at a school, stay long enough to get their refund check, and then they'll leave and go enroll at another school and do the same thing. So that information is being tracked. So at some point, you will be suspended for financial aid. And that's basically what that says there. Okay, so FAFSA requirements. So again, prior to receiving an award letter or a revision of your award, all documentation has to be reviewed. It has to be acceptable. If we receive a document that's not legible and we can't actually verify the information, your file will not be processed. No funds will be dispersed. And the financial aid office will reach out to you because now your appeal is considered incomplete. So as long as that appeal is in an incomplete status, then no funding will be awarded out until that has been cleared. So prior year, I sort of talked about this a little bit already. So this is the last topic. So it's a form of a professional judgment. It requires, it's a requirement for both student and parent, and it sort of ties into the information that goes on the original FAFSA when you first submit your FAFSA application. So for example, for a FAFSA that was submitted for the 2021-22 year, required 2019 tax information. But again, your circumstances could have changed from 2019, it's now 2021. And so, but you do have to provide the income as required for the 2019 tax year. If you're selected for verification, verification has to be completed. You have to receive your official award notice before you can submit an appeal for whatever changes to your household or your finances. So once awarded, then you can appeal to the financial aid office for consideration. And the last thing is the College Opportunity Fund, especially for students that may be transferring. So everyone that's a Colorado resident that graduated from a Colorado high school is entitled to the COF, which is basically a stipend towards your tuition. It has nothing to do with financial aid, but it does tie into the amount of credits that you can receive the stipend for. So up to 145 credits. And it's only eligible for undergraduate students. So, but once you have your undergraduate studies completed and have your bachelor's degree, technically you're no longer eligible to receive the College Opportunity Fund. But there are some exceptions. So if a student receives a bachelor's degree from a college participating in COF, the student is eligible to receive stipend funding for an additional 30 credit hours. And usually that's if a student has completed their undergraduate degree and maybe you're going on to nursing school, so you need to do some prerequisites. You can get COF to take those prerequisites as long as you're in a degree, enrolled in a degree program. Then there's also some waivers, two different types, institutional waiver and a Colorado higher education waiver. So institutional waiver will exist if the student, they can apply to the college for a one-time 1-year waiver, which consists of 3 consecutive semesters. So you can't take a stop out in between semesters. So if you're over 100, you've already used 145 credits, they will allow you to continue to receive those credits for another 3 consecutive semesters. So if the school refuses to allow you to take advantage of that additional cost, then you can appeal to the College Opportunity Fund or the Higher Education for Colorado directly. So if the school cannot grant a waiver or the student needs additional hours over and above the hours granted by the college, then you can appeal to the College of Department of Education. So Colorado law governs that state funding program be allowed CCHE to grant waivers to students. And if there's extenuating circumstances as it relates to health, enrollment, if your program changed, the requirements changed, then you could have a COF waiver as well. Okay.
Lisa, we've got a question about COF right here, and I'm sure you're going to get into it. But can you share a little bit about how do you apply for COF? What is that process like?
So there, you would want to go out to the COF website. It's a state of Colorado program. So it's Colorado Opportunity Fund. So you would go out to that website. I don't think I have the website on this particular slide, but I can get it for you. Or Marcia, you could put it in the chat. And the student would have to submit an application, and you only have to apply for it once. You can apply for it as early as age 13. So if there's students that's doing concurrent enrollment courses, they can use the College Opportunity Fund for that as well. And currently, the amount that's awarded is $40 per credit hour. And that's because the COF and state funding has been low, but in prior years, it's been like $80 a credit hour. And it's basically a credit, say for instance, the $40 and you're taking 12 credit hours, that's $480 that will be off your tuition. So straight off your tuition that you'll be billed for the full amount, but the bursar's office will receive that credit and it will apply directly to your student account. So if you go out to our registrar's office, there's a large section there because you do have to authorize for CU Denver to actually receive the funds to credit to your account. So you would submit the application and then you have to authorize it. Usually you have to authorize it every single semester for us to use it unless you do a lifetime authorization. Then you won't have to do that. So it's free money that is awarded to students just because they graduated from a Colorado high school. And I see there may be another point. Okay, thank you, Marcia. All right. And so last thing is that you want to make sure that you are monitoring your student email account and your student portal for any updates, especially after you've had any adjustments to your financial aid, or if you haven't received your award notice yet, make sure you're checking your email and your student portal because that's where they will generally provide that information for you. And then also if there's additional scholarships or funding that could be available to you, they will send it to your CU Denver email account. So you don't want to miss out on any scholarship opportunities as well. And so that you all know, the deadline for CU Denver scholarships is March 1st. So you would go to our financial aid website, look for a scholarship link, and you could go there to submit one application, and then it will provide you with a list of all the different scholarships that you would be eligible for in our system. So you're not having to do several applications. There may be some applications that may require an essay or letters of recommendations or things like that. So it will provide you with that information as well. All right, so here's my contact information. If anyone have any very specific questions relating to their circumstances, I'd be happy to assist you with that. And if it's something I don't know, I'm sure that I probably know someone who does, so I can at least get you in the right direction. So I'm going to stop sharing. So if there are any additional questions, feel free to either put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask. So it's a lot of information.
We received a question about future training sessions. When will they be offered? What are those future sessions about?
So I'm planning to do sessions every Thursday throughout the semester at 5:30. And next week I will be doing a session on being an independent student in the financial aid world. So going to detail about the documentation, the type of circumstances that would deem a student independent, meaning that parent information would not be required on the FAFSA. And then the fourth week, I will be doing one on student loans. So all the various different components of the student loan program. If you're interested in taking out a loan or you're thinking about it, then it's good to get information about what that actually looks like before you actually start to take out student loans, what it may look like in repayment, how much loan you may need. If you don't need it, you don't have to take it, even if it appears on your award notification. So just information about the do's and don'ts of the student loan program. So you can use the same link that you registered for tonight's event to register for future events. It will be the same registration link throughout the semester. So how do I know if COF showed up on my tuition bill, Ezra? It will be, you will see it. It will be listed on your bill as COF or College Opportunity Fund credit. So once it's authorized, and usually you want to make sure that it's authorized before the beginning of the semester, so that when they run the final bills, that it's taken into consideration on that. But it will automatically be taken into consideration and subtracted from your tuition on your student account. But again, go to the registrar's office website. You can put in a search for College Opportunity Fund or COF. It will have the website links there where you can go and submit the application, as well as opportunity to authorize the COF as well. Is there a parent portal? Yeah, I don't believe that we have a parent portal. I know that that was something that's been in discussion for a number of years, but I'm not aware that we have one now. There is a, you may want to contact our link center because they would have information about that. And I know we had an area on campus that was specific to parents and will provide different parent type of sessions and events. But I'm not sure how active they've been with COVID-19. The number for the link center is, you can put it in the chat also, it's 303-315, I think it's 3635. Or do I got it backwards? Marcia, do you know?
I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat as well.
Okay, awesome. What if I authorize it after the first week of school? There's a time limit. If you don't authorize it within maybe, and check with the registrar's office, I'm not quite sure what the specific deadline date is, but I think you need to do it at least a week after school or before school. Otherwise, if you don't submit the COF information prior to that, you will not get the tuition waiver for that semester. and then you can get it for the next semester, and it's not retroactive, so they're not going to go back and credit it. So you have to get it done timely, or it will not credit to your account. My child has a high function autism and where he's missing things. We do have disability services office where you can register for services there, but if you're talking about as far as the student portal and getting information, you may want to complete a FERPA form, FERPA, with the registrar's office. And basically that gives the school and all the offices on campus permission to be able to release information to the parent or a third party as it relates to the student. It could be as it relates to financial aid or the bill or grades, but the student has to agree because it's the student's record. So they have to agree that it's okay to provide permission. They have to complete that form, and on that form it asks for the individuals as to who that information can be released to. It's called the FERPA form, and that also is on our registrar's website as well. And Marcia has posted that in the chat. Make sure I haven't missed any questions here. Okay, yeah. So, but they will not release information to any person without that FERPA form being on file with the university. And it is something that has to be completed by the student, or if there's a legal guardianship or something like that, then they should probably be able to complete that form on behalf of the students. Are there any other questions? Okay, if not, then I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Again, if you have any questions, I'll put my phone number and email in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me. If you have questions about particular forms that you need to submit as it relates to an appeal, to make sure that you're providing the appropriate documentation, feel free to let me know, or you can go onto the financial aid website, and they will have a list of all the various forms and appeals that will be available, not just for verification and also for satisfactory academic progress, as well as all the various different appeals that can be submitted as well. You want to contact disability services for IEP support. So if nothing else, I wish you all a very good night. Stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you next week.